I'm clicking to go live. Here we go. Stop doing crazy things because we're live. Hello, everyone. My name is Pascal.
Hello.
Yeah, hey, Daniel, you're part of everyone. That's true. I was actually talking to our audience. Welcome, everyone. So today, new Threat Researchers Live, episode 12 already, June 24th, 2021. And my name is Pascal, and I'm joined with Daniel. So, Daniel, how are you doing?
Pretty good, Newman.
Also good. So last.
You enjoying the Euro Cup over there?
Oh yeah. Watching Belgium, of course. They're doing well.
Yeah.
Let's hope. I'm still hoping for a final. Who knows? So
Fingers crossed there.
Yeah, we'll see. Depends on the quality of the teams we will get against us. It always does, doesn't it? So last week we were talking. We had a special on the dark web, which was really great. I think I learned a lot of information. We had our special guest, but this month it's just Daniel and me again. We're gonna go over the news, and for sure in the future we will bring back more special guests, and we will do some more topics that we have other people that can come on and talk about the topics that are not directly in our area of expertise, and broaden our coverage, let's say. But for now,
I think it's good.
Yeah, go ahead, Daniel.
Oh no, I think it's good when we bring in third parties and bring in other inputs and advice on cybersecurity than what we specifically see. You know.
Oh yeah. People probably get tired of hearing our voices. So,
how could they ever get tired of hearing this voice?
So for today's episode, we're gonna talk about ransom DoS. Again, yeah, because they keep coming back. Well, if I say they, I'm not specifically referring to one group. It might be another group, a different group. Not sure. We don't know for sure. But one thing is for sure, ransom DoS keeps coming back. So we're gonna talk about it. Daniel, you want to give us some updates on the ransomware side? What happened last month? That's also something that we cannot leave out of the show because it has been since the start of this year. I'm not sure if the number of ransomware actually increased, because yesterday I was reading a post from somebody that said that the number of ransomware in itself decreased, but because they are now moving from automated ransomware to manual operations, but they are more selective in their targets, and also the targets are bigger, so they make more the news. So I think that maybe the effect of the news is bigger. We hear more about it. We think there's more, but in the actual numbers, it seems to be down.
The media will not let you forget ransomware is a thing at the moment.
Yeah, and then we will also talk about a fake DarkSide campaign. Just as with ransom DoS hoaxes or other hoaxes, business email compromise, there's also bottom feeders in ransomware that will be happy to try to extort you or to get some of your money, telling you that you have been hacked, but actually never been hacked. But more on that later. Then we will also talk about VPN attacks related to some of the ransomware attacks. We've seen that many of them were compromised through VPN. And related to that VPN, how fast password leaks are being tested by malicious actors when they are posted in forums. So there's a group, Newspire, who did research, and they just posted a bunch of fake passwords that they generated, but they looked real, to see how fast attackers are actually taking those passwords and testing them on the servers and also see if they're automated or manual. So we will talk about that for a minute. And then we will talk about, related to that, to leaks, not only passwords that are leaking, but yeah, there's also cookies in those files. So you can also buy cookies. And yeah, how could you use cookies? Well, cookies are like an encoding, might be an encoding of your session key or your information to authenticate yourself through different browser sessions, or browser windows. And yeah, that can be used to authenticate yourself if the cookie is not destroyed or you did not log out of your Slack session in this case. Well, it might be reused by somebody to get access to Slack in your name if they can steal your cookie. And then, yeah, Daniel's favorite subject is about real life examples. Yeah, putting a face on a hacker. And so it's not an old Latvian woman, but 55-year-old. That's a typo there. I fixed it in most of my contents, but not in this one. Then we're going to talk about club affiliates that were raided, X-DDoS, that claims for unpaid work. That's related to DDoS and ransomware. So that's where both of the worlds are coming together and intersecting. And then we're going to end with weaponized exploit and mask scanning for vCenter vulnerabilities, something we did an alert on earlier this month, and with an update of how much scanning we see, where the vulnerabilities came from, what do they look like, what to look out for. And then finally, in terms of typosquating, we have talked about this in different episodes about leveraging modules in open source scripting languages. In this case, it's Python, the Python module repository, typosquatting them to steal information, but also to do cryptojacking. And there's a new campaign out there that is running. So we will touch on that as well.
It's going to be a good episode.
I hope so. It sounds interesting to us because we selected the news. I just hope that for everyone that's following us, that it looks interesting. Let me check the chat. We have a chat, yeah, and we have people online, yeah. Just making sure that we're live. We are live, so that's a good thing. So first off, there's new ransom letters that came up in our customers. They came up beginning of the month, but there was already reports on the internet about campaigns, DDoS campaigns, following a ransom letter that was running on CSP cloud service providers and ISPs in Denmark and in Ireland. And it seems that most of them that received the letter also at some point had reported some problems because of a DDoS attack. So it sounded real already. Then we saw customers, and especially new customers, that were coming to us with letters and saying that do we need protection or not. And in most cases, yeah, we knew that there were letters out there with attacks following them. And now the group, well, whether it's the same group or not, I will leave that because we're not sure yet. So I will not make any statement or attribution of who's behind the DDoS attacks and if it's the same.
Well, let's just say whoever is behind this campaign has an interesting name selection.
Yeah, so that's why.
If it's the same people, they moved around a few words and made their own little combination.
Yeah, they started out with using the monikers Fancy Bear and Lazarus, and Fancy Bear they used when they were targeting mostly governments and different verticals, while they used Lazarus when they were specifically attacking finance, which made sense because Lazarus, the North Korean group, is well known for their big heists on banks and on cryptocurrency system to steal money. While Fancy Bear is better known for political mangling and trying to create chaos and disruption in different political areas. So it made sense at that time, but now they're coming with like a combination of Fancy Bear and Lazarus, which is the Fancy Lazarus, which, yeah, I don't know. It might be in an attempt to sound even more scary than both of them separately, but it has the opposite effect. When I saw it the first time, I was thinking it was a joke, because Fancy Lazarus, come on, who comes up with that?
I mean, Lazarus Bear would probably be a better one to go with.
Yeah, we were already talking about this before the show. When you're gonna talk about the DarkSide ransomware fake, soon they will start to use dark bears and black bears. So yeah,
polar bears.
Yeah, something to look forward to. And then the seeking, and then the seeking unprotected access, because most of the cases that we saw were all cases where customers were not always on cloud. I will not say that some of them had hybrid, and then balanced to the cloud for their protections when we saw that they stopped their attacks. So attacks start, and then you see the customer moving to cloud protection in their hybrid solution. And then the attacks immediately stop. We also saw attacks that were going on for longer, that we're not sure if they are related. So there are a couple of different things going on right now where finance customers in Europe have been attacked by long-going attacks. The vectors are not the same as in this campaign. They look different. And also the reports that I read from our colleagues from Akamai and also from NetScout, give them a shout out, because they also did their part of the research on those campaigns. Through Akamai, we've learned that they also had new customers that were seeking protection. So that more or less confirms what we are saying, that they are looking for unprotected assets and customers that have no protection, or better, organizations that have no protection at this moment. And then on the other side, NetScout was seeing that the attack patterns and the attack vectors were not correlating with the attacks that we saw in previous ransom DDoS campaigns. So that is also something that we see. We see two separate ranges of attacks right now. And we believe that one is related to those ransom letters. The other one, we are not sure yet, because we did not see a ransom letter related to the other attacks. And it seems to correlate with what NetScout is saying, that the attacks that we see right now, it's like shorter, not as big as 200 gig, what we saw before, but more like 60 to 80 gigs per second, and shorter bursts, like a couple of minutes, like 30 minutes. And then when they see that it's protected, most probably they just walk away. So we're not sure if it's the same gang. So we are pretty much aligned with NetScout. Is it the same or not? You will never know. Right? It's very hard to be sure, because those people, they always change their tactics, they change their infrastructure. Anybody can take over a name. The letters are public, so any actor that's out there that says, okay, I want to do a ransom DDoS campaign. Well, I don't need to write a letter from scratch. I just go search on the internet. There's plenty of examples. Take the most recent one, change the names, and go for it. So, of course, the letters will all look pretty much the same. So even though that the letters look like almost identical to the other ones, it's not sure that's the same. And one thing that is also interesting in this campaign is the ransom fee that's demanded. So remember, in August 2020, we saw ransom demands of 10 Bitcoin, which we were surprised by, because that's a big amount compared to earlier years when we saw ransom campaigns. That was typically like 1-2 Bitcoin maximum, not 10 Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, the original Mata collective was $5,000 back then. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how many Bitcoin it was, but they weren't asking for a lot of money.
Well,
nowadays, it seems like they're asking for, what was the high end on this campaign we saw was 5 Bitcoin, which is still quite a bit of money compared to what the original Mata collective was asking for.
Inflation, Daniel.
Inflation will definitely get everybody, right?
And taxes. Yeah, no, they don't pay taxes probably. Okay. Scratch that.
Smart criminals do.
Yeah, the good ones. So yeah, we saw 10 Bitcoin originally, and then we saw them move to like 5 Bitcoin, like half their ransom demand in January, when they were revisiting the same victims again, so the ones that they already attacked. And then they also had another letter. So instead of saying we are Fancy Bear or we are Lazarus and we have chosen your company, in January they came with a letter, hey, remember us? Maybe you forgot about us, but we did not forget about you. So we were busy with other more profitable projects, but now we are back. And that coincided with Bitcoin really like going 4 times the price. It went up from like $10,000 to $40,000 per Bitcoin. So with that rise, we saw that campaign starting, and they went really fast, one customer after the other. So they were revisiting older targets with the same letters again. So that would probably have been pretty sure the same group, because they knew exactly who they targeted before. They were using new Bitcoin addresses, so the Bitcoin addresses were not matching, but the customer names were matching. So that's pretty much conclusive that it might have been the same group there. Here it's different. Different customers being attacked, and also, yeah, the attacks look a little bit different. Moving on to another kind of letter, Daniel.
Yeah. So this is kind of an interesting little event here that actually Pascal had shown to me. This was an event that TreadMicro had covered, basically during the massive ransomware campaigns that we had seen covered in the media. A group decided to start targeting the energy and food sector as well. But like an RDoS campaign, they just simply sent a letter. They're leveraging names to basically intimidate their victims, like we see in RDoS campaigns. And inside the email, it says that they had breached their network and they are asking for 100 Bitcoin, which is an insane amount, in my opinion. But yes, these threat actors were calling themselves the DarkSide, and they were sending out emails to people in the energy and food sector, claiming that the networks had been compromised and that they wouldn't leak the data if they were paid 100 Bitcoin, which is very interesting to me, because as you see at the bottom, the prediction I want to throw out is that I think in the coming future, like maybe just in the next few weeks, it's going to be very possible that we will see RDoS campaigns, instead of leveraging Armada Collective, Fancy Bear, Lazarus Group, they're probably going to shift over to start using actual ransomware names. Abaddon, DarkSide, these groups are now gone, but they also could use Revil, whatever way you want to pronounce it, or any of the other ransomware groups that are notorious. They're in the media every week, that are proving to be a legitimate threat and proving to be paid. So, it kind of puts the proof onto the victim here to decide, is it really DarkSide or is it not DarkSide? If you're listening right now, it's not DarkSide. DarkSide's not going to send you an email like this. This is not their TTPs at all. This is more or less the TTPs of a ransom DOS campaign, and that's why I truly believe in the future we're going to start seeing these RDoS groups using names of ransomware groups.
Yeah, they're using pretty much the same techniques as we see in the ransom DDoS letters. If you look, they come with a fancy name, and then they list something that you would find in the media, like in the DDoS part. And I will go back. They will refer to here, perform a Google search and have a look at some of our previous works or using fancy lasers. But they also say perform a search for NZX DDoS or the New Zealand Stock Exchange DDoS in the news. You don't want to be like them. So they pick on some of the things that happened in the past and try to instill fear. And here they do the same. Recently, we held a successful attack on JBS, they said. So, and everybody heard about JBS food. Now, do you remember how much in Bitcoin the ransom was on Colonial and JBS, Daniel? I believe it was about 100 Bitcoins. No?
The ransom to Colonial Pipe was 4.4 million. Yeah, and so the ransom to JBS is 11 million.
Yeah. So for
it depends. I mean, the price of Bitcoin has been fluctuating quite a bit in the last. I mean, right now I'm looking at it's at 33. Yeah. So about 100 Bitcoins is $3.3 million. So maybe last week when it was around 40.
So I would say if you want to be credible, you're not going to ask for 1 Bitcoin here, right? Otherwise, people will say, "Oh, you're not DarkSide because you were asking 100 Bitcoin the week before, and now you're coming here for 1 Bitcoin." No, I don't. So to be really credible, I think that the 100 is not a bad choice, but it's a lot of money, yeah. And if you fall for
this, I mean, for 5 years, it's weird, comparing things, because like 5 years ago, when the Armada Collective, the real Armada Collective was going around, they're only asking for $5,000, and they were getting paid $5,000. It was interesting that now, seeing how much greed has hit these cyber criminals and what they send an email without hacking anything and demand millions. Yeah, and that it's a scary thing. Is that we tell people not to pay these ransoms, and they pay the ransom, and I feel for them. You're in a tough position. You got to get your business back up and running and all that other fun stuff. But at the end of the day, the reason why we have campaigns like this, the reason why we're seeing this is because people are paying, and these people take a shot in the dark and say, hey, if I spam out 100 people with this, maybe one person pays, and that's worth millions of dollars.
Well, if I get the email, I wouldn't pay. I don't have 100 Bitcoins.
Yeah, I wish I had 100 Bitcoin. So a little bit more of a ransomware update here. Just figured that we'd kind of give an update since it's something that we're covering in our local presentation. So first up is Colonial Pipe. They were hit by DarkSide. Their initial access vector, the initial access vector used by DarkSide to get into the Colonial Pipe system was an unused VPN system, which Pascal can speak about in a minute. They paid, as we said, 4.4 million in ransom. They paid it very quickly to restore the business. And for a while, we didn't know what had happened. So the payment had been made. And then we knew that a lot of the Bitcoin had been seized and that DarkSide had completely shut down and collapsed. What had ended up happening is the Department of Justice, US government, had come out and said that they had actually recovered 63.7 of the 75 Bitcoin. Basically, the 63.7 represents the affiliates portion of a compromise of Colonial Pipe. Affiliates usually get paid around 70-80% of a total ransom.
The
but
affiliates,
the rest
Daniel,
of
maybe you explain what an affiliate is.
Okay, yeah. So basically, we have operators and we have affiliates. Operators are the people that build and maintain the malware, and affiliates are the part of the gang that go out and basically do the shooting. They go out and they compromise the networks, they drop loaders, and they infect systems with ransomware payloads per the operators, and the percentage. A lot of these operators or a lot of these affiliates are actually working with multiple operators because operators offer different percentage payouts based on their victimology. So if you hit a larger victim and say DarkSide's paying 80%, of course you're going to go with DarkSide. But yeah, there's two sides of it. There's affiliates and there are operators, and there's a lot of affiliates out there and a lot of questions about affiliates and which country they're operating in, because we clearly know where the operators are and their allegiance and sometimes their political affiliation. But the affiliates themselves don't really have political affiliation. Their affiliation is with money and getting paid. They really don't care about the victim or anything else other than that. So a little bit more about ransomware update. We also have JBS. I think we all heard about this, a meat processing factory. They were hit by ReEvil and they paid an $11 million ransom. I think they paid within like 48 hours to get the business up and running. So there's no meat shortages in the world, which, you know, it's hard to say, like, don't pay ransom, but at the same time, like, people need to eat and we need to get the systems back up and running. So they're in a very hard situation to make that choice.
Yeah,
can't blame them for
it. It's a gray zone. It's not as black and white as a security person. You would probably say no, you don't pay them because then they get money. They can do more research and it gets more important. Other people see it, they will join. But at the same time, if it costs you 10 times as much to get your business back going, or it takes you too long and it will cost you more than the ransom, then on a business side it might make sense. Now, that is not reason enough, but in some cases we also saw that there was data involved that they threatened to leak if you don't pay. Now imagine that you have medical records that were stolen. Do you really want to be the reason that...
Or better yet, with a Colonial Pipe situation, they paid $4.4 million and they got some of it back, but now they're facing additional lawsuits for messing up and having issues with the supply chain, which, you know, I don't have an opinion on that either way, but you know, the impact of those lawsuits might exceed $4.4 million. So the like you said, there's a cost equation where these executives have to sit down and say, are we paying this to get the business back up online, or are we going to bite the bullet and, you know,
that is the cost equation. And then the other one is more of thinking about the people that had their data stolen, because if it's medical records, then is the medical records of third parties, of patients or employees or customers that is out there. Do you want to be responsible for that information getting out and being abused? If you're of course you're never sure that they're not gonna leak it in the future, But we have learned that most of them, we always say there's no honor among thieves, but these guys, they have a certain amount of honor, because otherwise their campaign will be over soon. If they say, yeah.
I would definitely say there's honor among things. I think the next slide is an actual example of that.
Yeah, but
even
in the payment, when you do negotiation, we always say, yeah, but you're negotiating with criminals. But if those criminals take the money and they don't provide you a solution that decrypts, or they don't do what they promised, they will leak the data anyway after paying. They will only do that one time, because the next victim will not pay, because they know if they pay, even though they pay, they don't keep their promise. They're gonna do it anyway, and you don't get the key, or they leak the data anyway. So their campaign is over. They can do one victim and then it's game over. If they want to continue going, they better be honorable in what they say, if there's honor in this case, of course.
Well, I mean, I can actually give an example of honor with thieves. Is that 5 years ago, there's a group, Armada Collective. They're very notorious. They were the ones that followed up DD4BC, and they would ask for $5,000 not to DDoS your network. If you paid, they went away. In a very popular case with one victim, the victim paid, and there was an attack that came in from another group, and the actual Armada Collective criminals refunded their victim the $5,000 because they didn't want to actually be seen as being crooked or non-honest, which is really interesting, looking at the way ransom and extortion has gone today, because I don't think these groups would return the money anymore. Where at one point in time they did, but at some point they still try to maintain their good name. But I think a lot of them have learned that they can just destroy their name and recreate an account, just like anybody that gets their account deleted on social media can go create a new account. It's easy to destroy aliases and create new ones in this digital world.
Yeah, of course, but they want to build a reputation, and that's also what we see, why those ransom DDoS campaigns are using names like Fancy Lazarus, right? Because they want to build a reputation, and that reputation will get them more credibility when they come with a threat that people would be scared and pay for it. But bottom line, what I learned from you, Daniel, is when you pay ransom, ask for the receipt, so that you can go for a refund later on. Yeah, okay.
Tax write-offs.
Okay, man. Enough joking. Bad joke.
And bad jokes all around. So Colonial Pipe and JBS both were hit, and they both paid a ransom. Two other victims here. We have Fujifilms and we have AData. Fujifilms was hit by ReEvil. They decided not to pay the ransom demand. And currently they're still dealing with the situation. VK Intel on Twitter, he and I believe Bleeping Computer had got into how this might have come about, and basically Fujifilm per VK Intel had dealt with a Qbot infection a month prior to this. And he goes further to talk about how Qbot and ReEvil have this working relationship where the Qbot gang is, as we were talking about earlier, like an affiliate. They're going around compromising businesses, and depending on who they hit and how much of a payout they might get from a ransomware operator, they're dropping the payload. And so at the moment, they're dropping ReEvil payload through Qbot infections to make a lot of money.
Qbot, who was known for dropping payload of credential stealing for finance, right?
Yep. Yeah, and that's kind of like how they all started with a Trickbot and a Motet as well. So they are all like these big financial stealers that became these massive loaders because, you know, money talks.
Yeah, but it's interesting to see they adapted their business model and now they're actually dropping ransom. Yeah, they can drop pretty much anything as long as they have that altnet network.
Yeah, tons of money. And the fourth one was AData. They decided not to pay the ransom, and their data has been leaked, unfortunately, by Ragnar Locker. So yeah, it's tough situations there. If you pay, you might get your system up and running, but you might see additional lawsuits. If you don't pay, you might get your system up running. You might see additional lawsuits. It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. It's a very tough one, and I definitely feel for all the victims stuck in that position that have to make a decision. You know, the last thing they probably want to do is have to actually get up in court and actually have to define and talk about. You know, there was I believe Colonial Pipe executives had to go in front of the U.S. Congress and testify about why they had to make that choice, and that was just really hard to watch because they had to make a choice to get their their network operational. But then they have to sit there for the next few months talking about this to everybody in the world, why they make this choice to get the business up and running. It's a very tough one, and I think that we need to kind of look at the way that we go about ransomware. Hopefully with Biden and Putin's conference.
Yeah. Also for Colonial Pipe was the initial access. You said I was going to talk about it. So the VPN. So the initial access was done through a VPN, so a remote access VPN, just like many companies have. However, that VPN was not used anymore, as far as I understand from some of the reports, and was still active, and the account that was used, so the username and password that was used to get access through the VPN and get access to the systems was actually in a leak. So that means that whoever employee had that account used the same account name and password on another website that was then later breached. That went into a leak on the underground. Somebody bought that leak, and through that leak, he got access to through that VPN account. So this sounds like, okay, that's some more explaining to do. And it also shows that with manual attacks, so most of these attacks are manual operated. That becomes much more difficult. When you have automated attacks, you know what to look for, you know how to protect. They don't turn over every stone of your security to find that one little hole that you forgot about. But when it comes to humans, humans are unpredictable. Humans can turn 180 degrees on you, and they will. What we see now is that they are they are leaving no stones unturned. Every potential hole is being exploited at this moment. You see that happening over and over again. Those attacks are not sophisticated. Well, I mean, the initial access is not sophisticated.
Well, and that was something I was going to speak about real quickly, is that an unused VPN account that was probably picked up for a few bucks, right? Resulted in a 63.7 Bitcoin payment to the affiliate. Dude, that's an insane return.
Well, we will see it about when we will talk about the EA hack through Slack. Actually, the cookie was just bought from the internet in a collection of cookies where they paid $10 for. So it might very well be that the guy who used this account paid $10 to get the account, and now strikes up maybe 25% of the 4.4 million just to do the initial access.
Yeah.
So that's
crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. Talking about VPN attacks, so this was also in the news, and I said it in the beginning. Newspire and also with some additional insight from Recorded Future was looking at VPN attacks, and they saw that in Q1 of 2021 there was an almost 2,000% increase in attack on SSL VPN. So Fortinet specifically, Pulse Connect Secure was 1,500. If you remember well, in previous episodes, we have been talking about vulnerabilities in Pulse Connect Secure that were leaked. Some were actual 0 days where a malicious actor, probably a nation state actor, discovered himself a 0-day, but in other cases it's just vulnerabilities that are already fixed in Pulse Connect Secure but not being updated by the people. The FBI and the CISO have been hammering on this like forever, since end of 2019, when this whole thing started with vulnerabilities being abused in remote access services. And not only Fortinet and Pulse Connect, there was also Citrix and even RDP, so Microsoft RDP was also one of those that was being abused at the time. So from end of 2019 until now, we have been seeing those being abused through vulnerabilities over and over again. And yeah, a 2,000% increase, that's an important increase. And actually 3 days later, I then saw the article by Catalin Simpanu, also from Recorded Future, so from the record, where he said that North Korean hackers were able to breach in South Korea's Atomic Research Agency through VPN bug. They did not specify which bug it was, but we know that nation states, and typically it's those that do the spying. So we're looking mostly at China, not North Korea. In this case, I think that the local politics have played. But typically what we heard about in 2020 was most likely Chinese operators or Chinese government related groups that were trying to abuse those VPN bugs to get access to spy. And that can be corporate spying, can also be governmental spying. So corporates to get information to have a competitive advantage, or government just to have intelligence. So VPN is still very much a very important access door that needs to be protected. And you might say, and I had this question actually also this week, where people say, well, are we still using VPNs? Are enterprises still using VPNs? Because we hear they're all moving their applications to the cloud. Well, there's always those legacy applications, you know, unless when you're born in the cloud. So the new startups that are born in the cloud, they will do everything in the cloud. They have Google Docs, they have their coding environment in the cloud, they build their applications, and their products and their services are hosted in the cloud. So they probably don't have a need for a VPN to a data center or a private cloud. However, in most other companies who have been operating for the last 10 years, well, they have legacy applications. Although that IBM now has a mainframe cloud, they might have mainframes running. And how do you take that old COBOL software, put that into a mainframe? Rewriting that software is nearly impossible in terms of the cost. So there will always be those legacy use cases where you still need VPN access. And that's what we have seen in the past. And also with the pandemic, we also saw that most people had to find a quick solution, because suddenly the pandemic hit us with a lot of surprise, and people need to work from home. So we don't have time to plan a migration of our on-prem application into the cloud. So what we do, well, what's the easiest way? Well, there's lots of VPN access. Just put it out there, and let's start connecting remotely. Yeah, and actually to add for the Colonial story, I forgot to say, they didn't have multi-factor authentication. So even something as simple as multi-factor authentication would have probably saved them from that attack. Yeah. So when you do it, you can do it, and you can do it securely. And don't always trust the people who are using the system. There's always one account or two accounts that is out there that is leaking. That is something that you cannot get around. So multi-factor might be a solution. It's not the optimal solution. It's breakable. Yeah, we know. But it's that extra barrier that makes it more difficult to get in, right?
Yeah, the way I like to say is that there's no silver bullet. There's just chains that you can put together, you know? So the more things that you have in the way, the more hurdles that you put in front of your network or your system or your account, the less likely the criminal is going to jump over all of them.
Yeah, we will also see it when we talk about the EA hack, and probably I already said everything, so we don't have to talk about it anymore. But in the EA hack, EA Games hack, it was a combination of a leaked cookie, so a cookie that was stolen before, that was sold off on the underground. Somebody bought it, used that cookie to get access to a Slack account, but did not have access to the enterprise. But then he started social engineering IT support and saying, hey, I lost my phone. Can you reinitialize my multi-factor token? And that's how they got access. So it's not only that credential that is leaked, but then you have the social engineering. So there was multi-factor authentication, but then they turned to social engineering, and then it's getting more and more difficult, and there's so many things to cover. Awareness is still one of the most important things to add to the list of things from your security hygiene that you have to have in check to make sure that you don't fall victim to those simple and human operated attack. And I think that the human operated is important there, because automated attacks cannot make it like that. So behind Daniel's head, we have the people who did a test, Agari. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for your cooperation. So Agari
anytime.
So this was covered by ZDNet. That's how I found the information. So I also like to to give them a shout out and mention them while I talk about this, because they brought the news to my doorstep, actually. So they did a test. What they did is they created a large batch of usernames and passwords and set up systems to see if they leak those fake or their imagined username and password, if they leak them, how long it would take attackers to actually come and try to test them and compromise them. So it's a little bit like put your key somewhere on a parking lot and then go home and wait to see until the hacker comes with his key and tries to open your door. It's that kind of thing. And what they found is that when they leaked the batches of passwords, 20%, so 1 out of 5 was accessed within the hour. 40% within 6 hours, then 50% accessed within 12 hours. So half of the usernames and passwords were tested after 12 hours. And they also noted that nearly all of the accounts were accessed manually. So that's somebody taking that list and going through the list one by one manually. So taking the username and password, going to that website where it was stolen from, and testing it. And they believe that they do that because they find a lot more information. If you do it manually, you also see where you get access to. You can quickly look, oh, that's the kind of company. That's the kind of access that I have here. Am I just a simple customer or is it an administrator? So they can already classify it, and then they can put it in more specific batches that they can resell for very high value. So if for example, somebody went through a list of thousands and thousands of accounts and was lucky and fell onto that account from Colonial, and then he sold it off to the guy who did the initial access with that account, and then that guy got a percentage of the money from the ransomware that came out of it. So you see how they're all interconnected, all these different things that are happening on the underground. Somebody is finding breaches and leaks. They sell them for a small amount of money, couple of bucks, $10 for example, and then somebody else makes more money out of it, and he works for somebody who makes even more money. So yeah, that's the state we're in, and most of it is done manually. So it's not automation anymore, but it's more and more human operated attacks.
I mean, leave it up to the hackers to throw us for a bamboozle, right? Like we've spent all this time chasing after automated threats, and all of a sudden they just switch up to manual.
Yeah, that is one thing. So like 2 years ago, we were so hard looking for all the automated threats and find solutions to counter automated, and then they just did one simple switch, and that is go manual. And yeah, automation is predictable. Humans are not. That's why in some cases we like automation a lot, but in this case I prefer the automation actually, because it is more predictable. And also automation evolves over time, but it's incremental evolution. A human actor switches tactics, and one can switch 180 degrees in a split second. It's not evolving anymore. It's just become much more difficult to protect against. Now that does not mean that automation is not used anymore. For me, it's like a balance. You know, you have that balance where automation is there and human or manual attacks are there. And now the balance is tipping towards the manual attacks and not that much to the automation. Before it was more tipped in the automation side, but they're still using automation, and they will use automation to go through the list for certain instances. They can already clear out the list, so they will always use a combination of manual and automation. Of course, they don't want to make their work too stupid or too hard. So it's not like they're dumbos. So they're still.
I wouldn't say they're dumbos at all. It's actually very smart. You know, we've just been spending all this time going in automation and reducing the amount of people in those positions, and now we have to bring more people back to actually catch these manual events, because AI, it's a good thing. You know, it's wave, it's ebb and flow. It brings people in, it moves people out, and you know, we keep evolving and learning these tactics and finding better ways to stop these criminals. You know, you have to have one action to prevent another. So.
It's also a little bit our past catching up, I find. So the legacy of those data breaches, so many data breaches happened in the past, and at that moment they weren't immediately exploited. Yeah, you heard that so many privacy data was stolen, but at that moment in time it was not reused that much. It's actually now that you start to see that all this history is catching up, because now they have access to all those usernames and passwords. People have their passwords unchanged for years, so they can still go back to breaches from years ago.
It also has something to do with ransomware as a service. You know, like here I am, just a little amateur skid hacker, and I got into corporation. Cool, I steal the files and lols, ha ha ha. But all of a sudden, someone's like, "Hey, dude, if you drop this piece of malware in there, you can get 80% of like $5 million." Well, now you have my attention. So that you know, that's another thing, is that those criminals in the past that were just doing data leaks and data theft didn't have the ability to create that malware and didn't have that malware available to them, but now it absolutely is, which becomes a bigger problem.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and talking about EA, here's the story, right? and actually, it's from Vice. It's from Joseph Cox, and Joseph Cox, he has very nice articles. So typically, I like a lot because it has that entertainment factor in those articles. He does a lot of research and tries to find the right angles and build the whole story. So you have mostly, they come later than the news, some other medias out there that are more hotter and more direct on the news. But when he comes with a story, it's always like completely built, and you see from the beginning to the end with the human side in there. Yeah, I should not make too much promotions, should I? But anyway, I like Vice.
Vice is a great outlet.
Yeah. So, and yeah, so this, we already talked about it. So somebody of the hackers got access to EA by buying a batch of stolen cookies. So, you know, cookies, those are the things that sit in your browser or that your browser
Girl
uses.
Scout cell.
Yeah,
so those ones.
Yeah. So browsers use cookies to make sessions persistent. When you have in-memory cookies, you have cookies that are on disk. If you close your browser, you open it up again, you go to the same website, he remembers that you were there. HTTP is stateless. An HTTP server is dumb. You connect to him, you get your information. Even a second later, if you connect again to ask something else, he forgot about who you are. He's just too dumb to remember what happened before. So what developers did is make HTTP stateful. Remember what you were doing, build a history. And that's how we made applications that were stateful, is by using cookies in either in-memory or session keys with database stores in the backend. But cookies are one of those things that are used a lot because they can persist on a system. So you can keep track of what a user did. And keeping track of a user, of course, advertising makes a lot of use of cookies. That everybody knows. Now, yeah, at some point, I believe that Mozilla had a vulnerability in cookies, that it was easy to extract them. So those malwares like Qbot, they have sometimes payloads that come and just scrape information from your browser, which can be password lists, cookies. They can use man in the middle to get to access to your accounts, but cookies is one of those resources that they're scraping. And they also sell that. Typically they go cheap because a cookie, you never know if the cookie has been invalidated. Like for example, you log into a website, to an online website, to Slack for example. If you click the logout, your cookie will be invalidated. So if somebody stole your cookie while you were online and you click logout and now he tries to reuse the cookie, it will not be valid because you closed your session, you logged off. However, if you just close your browser, most of the cases that cookie will still be valid. So one of the things to do, people, don't just close your browser, log off, click the log off button. I should do it more myself as well, but sometimes I think about it. So it's a good thing to do, to log off. Now with that cookie, you can authenticate, you can impersonate somebody. So if I steal your cookie, well, I can start up my browser, put the cookie in there in the store. I go to the website, automatically the cookie is selected based on the domain name of the website. The cookie gets loaded, give that information to the server. So, oh, hi Daniel, you're back. No, I'm not Daniel, but yeah, he doesn't know that because I have the cookie of Daniel. So I can now work as Daniel in Slack. So of course I don't have access to the system, I just have access to Slack. So then comes the trick that you use social engineering. So from Slack, from that channel, the attackers reached out to IT support and said, hey, I lost my phone at a party last night. Probably I was drunk. So yeah, my multi-factor token does not work anymore. So can you give me a temporary token, or can you give me register my new phone? And there they got the rep to actually give them a token to access the network, and that's how they got into the network. So just a $10 cookie stash or cookie jar. Should I call it a cookie jar? Jar is actually Java archiving, so it can also, it's like a zip file for Java. I'm such a geek. I'm sorry.
It happens. It happens.
Yeah. Talking about geeks, Daniel.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Speaking.
There's
of
your
geeks.
lady.
So, if you've been watching these episodes, you know that I have a thing for faces of criminals. I like to kind of show what criminals look like and talk about it because, you know, getting into this industry, everybody kind of thought everybody was a hacker wearing a hoodie, and clearly it's not the case. So here we had an arrest of someone that was behind the Trickbot group. She was arrested about 4 months ago in Florida. She's a 55-year-old Latvian woman with 2 kids. She went by Ala Witt, gonna mess it up, aka Max, and she was a programmer and coder for Trickbot. She was charged with 19 counts out of 47. It's actually really interesting if you get into the indictment and all the information that DOJ put out. She was only one of 17 members that are being charged. And it's pretty interesting. You read through and you can read about all the defendants and co-defendants and their actual roles as far as being a malware developer or sourcer, or a person that goes out and does the web injects, someone drops malware. It's very, very, very interesting. But this lady, she was actually the one that was being the malware developer for the Trickbot group. She wrote the code related to the control, deployment, and also the payment of ransomware. She also devised a way to monitor and track authorized users of the Trickbot malware, which is pretty interesting. She was very much a key figure in Trickbot. And if people are aware, Trickbot are not aware, Trickbot used to be a banking Trojan that evolved into a loader a few years ago and was notorious for dropping ransomware payloads. A few months ago, the DOJ, United States government, and a few other government agencies around the world, as well as corporations, attempted to take Trickbot offline. They did this through a couple different hacks, and they put it down on its knees. But Trickbot had come back. It was leveraging what was called Bazaar Loader, and now Bazaar Loader is dropping Trickbot tags onto phones. So they're still developing, they're still evolving, and they're still working. Apparently, even with 17 people facing indictments and charges, which is pretty impressive. It shows you how big these hacking gangs can be. It shows you who are behind these hacks. It's just not teenagers. Typically, when you see someone get arrested, it's usually a man under the age of 30. And that's just simply not the case. Everybody can be a hacker. Anybody and everybody can be a hacker. And people find their ways into the dark side through all different types of means and methods. It's a little interesting if you get into this lady's VK account. She talks about wanting to do these things and travel, and she sure enough did it.
Yeah, VK. You mean V contacted the most popular social
the Russian social
in Russian speaking countries. Yeah, it's like Facebook, but Russian speaking countries.
Exactly. Yeah, as I call it, the Facebook knockoff. But
I don't think everybody would agree with you.
I would say, yeah, anybody that uses VK is probably like, Facebook's a knockoff of VK.
Okay.
It probably goes both ways. But
yeah,
to be fair,
we already lost our Russian viewers now. I just see that. Yeah. Well, it's not a bad.
Well, I mean, show them your T-shirt; they might come back. Yeah, so just interesting. I want to show our viewers exactly what the face of a Trickbot operator looks like, and give you a little bit of insight behind how many members were in the group and what they were doing. It's very complex. It's very interesting, and it's not what people assume hackers look like. And then another raid and arrest that was going on. So there's a group out there called CLOP, TA505 is another name that they're attributed as. And there was a major arrest that happened. 6 affiliates, I would say affiliates, but I guess now more information's come out through Catlin and Recorded Future and a company that tracks Bitcoin payments, saying that these 6 affiliates were actually the money launderers for the Clop ransomware group, and that they were laundering somewhere close to $500 million for the Clop group, $500 million, which is kind of impressive. And I was making a joke with Pascal before this began. Is like, what do you get for laundering $500 million for a criminal organization? Well, you get a Mercedes, you get an Audi, you get a Tesla, and about $180,000 in cash and a new Mac. But which is interesting. On the next slide, we'll get into that a little bit more. But the arrest was a joint operation with Ukraine, United States, and South Korea, mainly because Clop, the ransomware group, had attacked 4 victims in Korea in 2019. And then more recently in 2021, the group had attacked Stanford University Medical School, University of Maryland, and the University of California, which we know schools, medical systems, and all this is a huge target for ransomware groups. The one thing that we do know, and even after all this information came out, is that it wasn't them core operators. And the reason we know this is because we can go to the Clop PR site and see their new victims that they've listed. And right here we have them listed in green. These are the newest victims of the group. So it shows that these people arrested were not the main operators. They were affiliates, and furthermore information that came out today, they were actually the people laundering the money for the group, which kind of interesting. And of course, the battle station comparison. So we showed the Emotet gang battle station when they got arrested. So I figure that we'll show the Clop gang battle station, which is interesting. I mean, you assume hackers have money and they have these nice battle stations. We all spend tons of money building our battle stations and posting them on Reddit. And Emotet looked like they were living out of a dumpster. Some people might say that's.
I do remember when you brought that image a couple of episodes ago. We had that image in the show when you showed the Emotet gang arrests and the door that was knocked down, and then you had the battle station. It was like I was expecting like gaming rigs, with expensive gaming cards, and then you see like a chassis of something that's hooked together, and then a very messy desk with a very cheap monitor on it. It's like, oh my god, this is how they make their money? Where does the money go through?
Yeah, and the thing I find funny is like I'm kind of conflicted with different like characters and personalities of hackers. The Emotet game seems like very much a hacker-centric battle station. I mean, you got soldering irons, you got pieces of computers everywhere. It looks like they're building something, like they're a maker. And then you go over here to the Clop gang, and they got the nice little Mac, and they got all their paperwork, they got their passports and everything. And they're very official business oriented. And it kind of shows that what the Clop gang had was a lot of materialistic goods. And what their Emotet gang had was nothing really. It's just very interesting comparison. I personally would love to see.
You are saying that the Clop gang is a GUI operator, while the Emotet gang is the guy who goes in the terminal.
You want to start that fight right here, Pascal? The one thing I was going to say is I want to see what the Trickbot operator, the Latvian woman's setup looked like. She was in the United States and she was in Florida, so let's see what Trickbot looks like next. Hopefully I'll have an image for our next live stream of her setup, and we can do a comparison.
Yeah. There's a lot of paper on his office, though. Did they put that special there, or are they really taking a lot of notes during their attacks?
Hey, man, $500 million isn't going to launder itself. I'm sure he's got to buy a lot of companies and move a lot of money. And this is another interesting thing I want to bring up. It was well covered on Twitter. And this is something that I find interesting, and it also shows combining threats. Ransomware attribution. I guess Radware attribution might work between you and I if we want to talk about GUI and terminals. But yeah, ransomware arbitration. Basically, arbitration is when two parties want to go argue it out in court over financial pay or whatever it may be. In this situation, we have a user named X-DDoS who provides DDoS services on a number of different forums, is claiming for unpaid work. And put claims up for both DarkSide and Avedon. This was kind of interesting. When the DarkSide and Avedon groups fell apart and their operators were banned and removed from forums, people came in and they began saying, hey, these groups didn't pay us. Specifically, like in the Colonial Pipe situation, you had an affiliate come in and say, hey, I didn't get our money. And why didn't they get their money? Because the US government stole it from their staging wallet. But anyways, this user came in and said, "Hey, I did DDoS attacks for DarkSide and Avedon, which is a new growing technique, and procedure where if the victim does not communicate with the attacker, they will use DDoS attacks as a way to bring the victim back to the negotiation table."
Yeah,
well, this user wasn't paid.
Extortion, yeah.
Yeah, we wrote a blog and everything about it. But this user wasn't paid for this activity. So what this user did is they opened up arbitration and what they call the people's court. On forums, you can actually call out people for not paying. And this goes back to our whole, do you trust hackers? Do they have, are they responsible? Are they trying to keep up their reputation? Yes, they are. And in this situation, the users were removed because they are already found to be scammers and banned. And this user, X-DOS, was actually awarded Bitcoin for their claim, which is very interesting. When these groups join these forums, they have to put a deposit of a certain amount of Bitcoin to prove that they are above the board and they're going to conduct themselves in a business fashion. And in this case, it's exact example of what happens when a scammer starts scamming and doesn't pay their affiliates, and they get banned. And it's up to the admin of these websites to actually distribute the funds from the prior purse. Very new, very interesting thing. But this also highlights a growing threat of the combination of ransomware and DDoS. For a long time, ransomware and DDoS were separate, and some people always wanted to put RDoS and ransomware together, and took a lot of battles to say, no, these two things are separate. But sure enough, here are the hackers making us look dumb again. They decide that they're going to start doing DDoS attacks with ransom. So we have like RDoS, whatever you want to call it.
Triple extortion or triple RDoS.
Yeah, triple RDoS. There we go. Where the groups are launching DDoS attacks now against ransomware victims, and they either have the talent in-house or they're hiring external, as we can see with this case, X-DOS, who was X-DOS, who was an affiliate for these two groups. But very interesting and something to look into and something to watch. Also feeds into my earlier prediction that these RDoS groups will begin using these names because we clearly already have a DDoSer out there that is using these people's names officially to launch attacks against their victims. So it's only a matter of time and before the scammers, the horrible criminals out there, decide that they're going to start using these names for their own benefit. And that's why I say in the next few weeks, I wouldn't be surprised if we see an RDoS campaign from someone called the DarkSide Avedon or Avedon DarkSide, or however they want to mix up the names. But the only reason why they're doing this is that the only reason they're doing this is to instill fear. Well, no, it's good because we're talking about it now. So if anybody gets a letter from Avedon DarkSide, call us. We'll tell you it's fake.
Dark Avedon, yeah.
Yeah.
Or Avedon Bear.
It's growing.
Fancy Avedon.
Yeah, Polar Avedon. You never know. Ooh, you need to go make a website real quick. It definitely
to fetch the domain name. Yeah, reserve the domain name.
Be right back. So I think it's a general issue that we're all going to have to kind of keep our eye on, is how does DDoS and RDoS, or DDoS and ransomware, become a combined threat in the future. And when I say future, I mean this year. I'm not saying like something next year, the year after that. It's probably within a few months type of thing.
Yeah, but we already see the cross-pollination across different tactics, bots scanning for credentials, credential stuffing, leaks, being abused, initial access, up to people who are running botnets and on the Windows side, and then we will, and more also on the Linux side, because now you have DarkSide for Linux. There are several of those ransomwares that are also starting to target Linux, which makes sense because if you go to a cloud system, what is that operating system that's running most of the cloud? It's called Linux, So more and more servers are running Linux, so it makes sense to have ransomware for Linux. And
threats never stay the same. They always evolving. So if you assume that ransomware is going to stay the way it is right now, you're going to be sorely mistaken in a few months.
Yeah, I think that we will see more and more of that ransomware going after containers and in the applications, because we already see more crypto mining targeting Kubernetes vulnerabilities, targeting containers, start to crypto mine in containers. But next logical step would be to drop a ransomware and just destroy the application or steal the data of the containers of the application. So,
Yeah.
and we all know how easy it is to get into some of the Linux systems when we talk about IoT botnets and Linux botnets. So, unfortunately.
It's gonna be a disaster.
Yeah,
Ah,
talking about botnets and exploits. Good transition.
Yeah.
I even forgot that this one was coming. Weaponized exploits on vCenter vulnerabilities. So there were two vCenter vulnerabilities earlier in the year. One that was in February of 23rd that we did not talk about. So that was like one of the first vulnerabilities. And the vulnerability is remote code execution through the HTML5 client of vSphere. So you know where you go with your browser and that you have the interface on your different vCenters where you can change the properties and start up the machines and manage the machines. There's a vCenter plugin there that had a vulnerability that results in a remote code execution. So and so VMware published that on February 23rd. By February 24th, there were already 2 functioning exploits published out there. And Michael, Kliuchnikov, yeah, okay, got it. Yeah, hey, my Russian roots, you know. No, I'm not Russian in root. From Positive Technologies, published his research. So actually, he was gonna wait. So I put a thumbs up for the guy for publishing his work because he was planning to wait to give people time to install the patch. So by February 23, with the disclosure, there's a patch, people need to start updating their systems. Of course, if the attackers within 24 hours have a functioning exploit, that means that you should patch as soon as possible because you are vulnerable and you can be breached. So he was gonna wait to give people a good amount of time to do the updates as they need to be done, because not everyone can update within 24 hours. Sometimes production requirements have you wait for a certain window. Even if we are more in an agile world and we can balance, it's still touchy-feely subject. So not everybody can update within 24 hours. So, but after those 2 exploits that he discovered, he decided, okay, I'm gonna post my findings anyway. So that people are at least aware of how to detect the exploit. So that was certainly a thumbs up for Mikkel. And then later on, Talos from Cisco found that the Necro botnet, it's a Python botnet that's doing cryptojacking, so Monero and Tezos mining on their victims, was first seen using this exploit May 11th. And there you have the detection string. So it's just a post to a certain URL because that's what the vSphere client, the HTML5 client, would post to change property of that plugin. And then more recent on May 25th, there was another vulnerability discovered, again a remote command execution, but this time in the vSAN health check plugin. So this again a plugin for the vSphere HTML5 client, so vCenter plugin. For vSAN, for the health check on vSAN, and even if you say, well, I don't use vSAN, well, it doesn't matter because the plugin is enabled by default in all vCenter deployments. So unless you explicitly disable that plugin, it will be enabled by default. So, and yeah, a couple of days later, by June 2nd, Windy's blog had enough details to weaponize the exploit, and I put a thumbs down on this one because, yeah, that was there was no working exploit yet. That was the first one to publish it. And yeah, you probably cannot read, but if you have translation, the links will be down below soon. When you go to the link, use a Tor browser or something because it's not always accessible because it's known for having not so good things. So don't download anything from the website, but go view it, translate it. You can read it. And here is Mikhail's blog. Now in the scanning, so the first one that was disclosed on February 23rd, you saw that the disclosure was done on February 23, and by February 25, we already see the first scans coming in. And you see that there's yeah, scanning activity of a couple of hundred worldwide, sometimes some peaks in there. And here was where the Necro botnet was actually including that exploit. Now you see a couple of very big spikes. Some large spikes are, and probably it's gonna be hard to read for the people on YouTube, and that's on purpose. I don't want you to read all the ASNs that we have in the top graph, because we don't wanna call out anybody who might be hosting malware or anything. But the top one that you cannot read is Avast Software. We all know that this is a security company that provides antivirus software, and that doesn't mean that they were infected and actually attacking. No, that means that they are scanning for vulnerable hosts and trying to map out. So that is the thing on the internet. There's always those scanners that are continuously randomly scanning the whole internet and trying to catalog the vulnerabilities, sometimes to alert the people and say, hey, be careful because you have an exposed host, you better close it. Sometimes it's just to be able to see how big the threat is. If you find a new vulnerability and there's like only 5 machines on the whole world that are exposed to that vulnerability, that's a small threat. But you can find a vulnerability and maybe have 2 million hosts on the internet that are open and exposed for that vulnerability. Well, then that becomes a major threat, right? So it's always interesting to do an assessment of what's happening. So, and then the same here for the second one. So the second vulnerability, May 25, was disclosed by VMware, and the first scans we saw in June 1, which pretty much overlaps with Windy's blog on June 2, because he wrote it in Chinese, so that means that he sits on the other side of the world. So when it was June 2 and the blog posted, it was still June 1 in America. So I think that was an American, the first scan. Here you go for attribution. Hey, man. Logic, right? No.
I mean, I personally believe a lot of. I was going to say I personally believe a lot of the crime comes from America, but that's a whole nother ever live stream there.
This was an American honeypot that captured it, so that's why the date was there. It doesn't mean that the attacker came from America or from Russia.
But still, my point stands. I believe sometimes that the United States might be a little bit more guilty than everybody else.
So here I don't see immediately the good guy scanning, but there must be scans from the good guy. And I remember that I checked some host names instead of ASNs in the scans, and some out there. Some of the big chunks that you see, the 1,800, some of them are white hat scanners. Now, talking about internet scanning and white hat or gray hat or whatever you want to name it, scanning, IoT search engines are certainly a big component of that. So when you're a good guy, but also when you're a bad guy, and that's the bad thing about those scanners also don't leave any stones unturned. We talked about the deep web last month. Remember, the deep web is the part that is not indexed, but yeah, you have those IoT search engines who are indexing. They are going after every IP. Even if your IP has no DNS entry, well, it will be registered somewhere, but it has no DNS entry. And typically you would say, okay, I'm going to put some service out there. Only the people who know the IP can access it and know where it is, which is what started the whole Mirai botnet problem with IP cameras, because people were setting up IP cameras with the default password of admin. Anybody could log into the interface, see the images of the whole hotel. So those kind of things happen because people think that if you connect a device to the internet and it has an IP address, but it has no DNS entry, nobody can find it. Well, until we now have several scanners around there that are scanning the world over and over again on all popular ports. And you can see here, it's not limited to HTTP, it's SSH, SMTP, RDP. And in the case of HTTP and HTTPS, they will also grab the response of the web page. So in the case of vCenter, the typical response that you would be looking for to find if a server is running a vCenter HTML5 client, well, that's looking for ID_VC_welcome, because somewhere in the page it will respond with that information in the code. So when you put that in Census, for example, you find about 30,000 HTTP hosts that are open with this thing. Now, that does not mean that every of those IPs will be vulnerable because you did not look at the version yet. However, if there would be a version encoded in the initial response, you can also add the version. So sometimes you can even check, well, give me all the devices that are running this kind of web interface and that have this firmware version. You can search that in Census. They have a whole database. Now, sometimes they're not updated. So sometimes you will see that the last update was like a couple of days ago or a couple of weeks ago. Sometimes it's on a dynamic IP address, or the IP address might have changed. But for most vCenters, I would think that the IP address would be a fixed, would be a static IP address, not something that's like a router where you have dynamic IP addresses. So this was Census, but it's not limited to Census. You have Shodan as well. You search for the same string in Shodan, and it shows you 5,800 results. So you see that again. They even give you the information. It's vCenter server, VMware vCenter server 6.7, build number 88313179. I think that gives you enough information to know if it's vulnerable or not. Yeah. Even the SSL certificate will tell you which kind of company it is. So now it's just the point to use that information and just perform the hack. And now we said that you have the manual attacks, of course, but also automation can help. Well, Shodan, for a couple of bucks, you can have access to their API. And everything that you see here, you can do through an API. So the attackers can very well write a script that goes to the API, searches for IDC_welcome, checks for the version number of VMware, and then take that IP and then perform the exploit, see if it's exploitable, go in there and drop something, a reverse shell, or just flag it as being, hey, this one is open, we can do something here. So they can use automation to leverage those IoT search engines as well. And then you have ZoomEye. So through ZoomEye, exactly the same. You put in the same string. And these, by the way, so the Census, the Shodan, the ZoomEye were all done using either unregistered. So ZoomEye was unregistered, Census unregistered, Shodan was a free tier account to use their interface for searching. If you want to query something else on an IP on Shodan, you need to register. But you can register for the free tier account. So there was no money spent, no license acquired, and in some cases not even left my information who I was using it. So it's even less information than I need to provide if I want to get access to the latest DDoS report or to another ebook. But I can get access to all the servers that are out there who are vulnerable to this. So that is part of the danger, and that's part of why we are alerting and why we say people be careful if this comes out and they know the exploit, they know how it works. If there's a script out there fully functioning, you don't need to be a rocket scientist with a big infrastructure to be able to abuse it on day zero. Within 24 hours, people can just use that API. Anybody who can write a Python script, there's enough examples out there that use the APIs of the IoT search engines. You take the IP, you feed it into the proof of concept script that was on GitHub, and off you go, off to the races and hacking. That's what happens. And to end with the supply chain attack, so Sonatype found that there was new PyPI modules. So you remember that we talked several times.
We've talked about this before, yeah.
Yeah, about Python modules being infected. So malicious modules that contain skimmers to skim your SSH credentials, for example, or to take the environment variables from your system and upload them so that hackers can get access to your development systems or to your devices. In this case, it's a full crypto mining malware that's embedded in those modules. And typically, those will use typosquating. So here are some of the packages. So you see it's Maratlib1, matplotlib, and that will be, matplotlib is a very popular library for Python to make plots. So matplotlib is just a typo, so they go after typo squattings. And also sometimes the automated modules where they have a character that's encoded in a different kind of coding page or character that looks the same but is not the same. That way they can typo squat and they can have people install those modules. And once they are installed, in this case, crypto mining malware. Okay, that brings us at the end of the show. I think we covered a lot of ground again, yeah?
Yeah, we definitely did.
I don't know. We have some overlap with previous episodes, but we always try to build an update on what we did before, and I'm sure we will do the same in the future. We will be back in 1 month, I think, unless you go in holiday, Daniel. Are you on holiday next month?
No.
No. Okay, not yet.
No.
Me neither. The month after I go to Russia, hence the T-shirt. So in August.
Maybe the month after that I'll go to China too. You know, why not risk it?
Well, well, we can stream from there. You know, YouTube works everywhere, right?
8 months until Beijing Summer Olympics or Winter Olympics.
Yeah.
You never know.
So just to let you know, I will copy all the links about what we talked. So all the different topics, we have all the links and the references and sources. I will put them down below. They're here on the top, but I will copy them below so that I can get access. And yeah, if you have the time, subscribe. What else do I need to ask? Oh yeah, click on the little bell icon or something for notifications. What else do people need to do on YouTube? Oh, I almost forgot it. It doesn't matter.
Subscribe. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Smash the subscribe button.
Like.
Always want to say that. Yeah. Like to.
Yeah, no. Actually, like is better for the algorithm than subscribing. So for sure, like it, because the algorithm will then put us more on top.
Exactly.
Okay, so with that knowledge
awesome.
And with our big insights into how YouTube works, thank you very much, and hope to see you again next month. Bye bye.
Take care. Thank you.